I'm just going to present sort of a snapshot from what we've found and what we've experienced, I guess, on our peninsula. Particularly, I guess, we had a pretty severe drought in 2008, 9 and 10, just when I went to uni, so that was really good timing. So that was a big eye-opener, and that's when the Grain and Graze project actually started. So we sort of were starting off on a pretty low basis where we were averaging sort of annual rainfalls of about 200 mil, so it was pretty marginal stuff. And we thought I had to learn how to cope with that, and we looked to grazing crops as backup for a lot of our seasons, because we just had no pastures at all for 3 solid years. We've had some pretty good years since. The last couple, similar to you guys, have been pretty poor. Last year we didn't start sowing until, well, July pretty much, so we had to sort of have a look at our stubbles and their containment feeding and all that sort of thing. But we've had a pretty poor pasture base for the last couple of years. 2016 was amazing, and we had some pretty good years, before that as well. So ups and downs, but these are just some of the learnings that we've sort of gathered from that. So just from the Grain and Graze project, I mean, this is telling you to suck eggs, this slide, but it's just telling you the 5 different ways, 6 different ways in which you can utilise crops by livestock. So your dual purpose crops, which is what everyone refers to as Grain and Graze. It took a while to make sure that all the farmers got their heads around the fact that the project wasn't just about grazing crops the whole time, and it wasn't just about Grain and Graze, but the first dot point is using the dual purpose crops, which is actual Grain and Graze. Then you're looking at sacrificial grazing, realising that your crop's not going to come to anything and grazing that. Conserving your crop as silage or hay. Grazing standing crops, which is something that we've only really just started using over on EP. Sam Jolly's quite a big advocate of doing this, and it's pretty much purposely sowing the crop to graze it as a standing crop, or realising during the season it's not going to come to much, and locking it up pretty much, and not even putting the header in there, putting the sheep in there later in the season. So grazing it after maturity, and it acts as a feedlot. So it's a good sort of tool that our farmers use when they want to go to the beach. You don't have to put them in the feedlot, you don't have to be checking them every single day. They're getting their balance of their roughage and their grain by grazing the standing crops. So it's sort of just a tool you can throw in your bucket. Stubbles, everyone normally graze the crop stubbles if you are a cropper as well as a livestock farmer, and grazing stubble regrowth after harvest. Sounds like you guys were a bit like us. We didn't get a drop of rain this year after September pretty much, so we had no summer weeds whatsoever, so that one didn't apply this year, but in previous years we've had quite a lot of stubble regrowth and been able to utilise that as well. So when you're considering grazing, hay, or a bit of a combination, there's quite a few things to take into account. And I've just listed the main things that we've sort of learnt from the project here. So you've got to work out the anticipated yields, the amount of grain that can physically be picked up by the header. A lot of people don't take that into account. Sometimes you're getting crops that are quite low and the header can't physically actually get underneath there, so you're better off chucking the sheep in there, or cutting it for hay. The cost of harvesting and grain storage. We're in a pretty unfortunate position this year where they've just shut the railway lines down on us on Eyre Peninsula, and they've shut quite a few silos as well. So on-farm storage is going to be something that we're going to have to start forking out a little bit for, and it might just be better putting it through the livestock than paying for the on-farm storage or transport costs, but you guys are a little bit closer to markets over here, so might be a bit different. Grain prices are fluctuating a bit, but looking at those compared to your livestock prices at the moment, fortunately both are fairly high at the moment. Your seed required for next year, what seed you're going to harvest to use in containment or feedlotting situations. Your weed seed set, if you're a cropper and really need to concentrate on that, and your herbicide resistant levels. And then when you're looking at grazing, you've got to look at your meat and wool prices, which are amazing, so that's not really too much of a problem. The actual feed value for the livestock, so the quantity and the quality of it, sometimes you can get pretty poor quality stuff, or sometimes, like last year, our stubbles were amazing. You know, we haven't had to put sheep in containment until April this year, just because our stubbles were fantastic. So looking at the quality, particularly according to how much summer rain you get, that's a really important one. Your current livestock condition and future requirements, it's much easier, as you guys would know, to maintain your sheep and cattle rather than let them get back down and try and bring them back up. And weighing up sale versus agistment versus feed is something that a lot of our farmers have had to do over the last few years. A lot of agistment has been happening because we've had quite patchy areas, which is sort of a first for us. But holding on to the feed, the grain prices have been really good too, so it's just been a bit of a toss-up. And your ground cover, we've had a couple of regions that the ground cover's just got so poor that a lot of people have almost sold off all their breeders as well, so they've just really had to cut back. So lots of things to consider there. So first of all, going into your sacrificial grazing. The findings in Grain and Graze suggest that it might be more profitable in your poor seasons to sacrifice the grain than actually reap it. So again, this project ran from 2008 to 2017. So that's the years that we're sort of talking about there, but they did find in some of those years that it was much more profitable on a gross margin basis by putting your livestock in the paddock rather than actually reaping the grain. So something to consider. And the percentage of years that grazing might be more profitable really depends on seasonal and location and prices. So it's something that differs from year to year. There's no black and white answer. Must be, you know, a realistic decision based on your rainfall and, you know, what you're sort of predicting the prices are going to be like towards the end of the year. From an environmental perspective, you've got to look at it as well. Obviously, you guys have had a reasonable start over here, so it's probably not something you're going to have to take into account too much. But, you know, when you're looking at those really poorer years, you've got to make sure that at least you've got a third of something in your paddock anchored. Otherwise, you're going to get problems with drift and a lot of issues that we've seen the last few years. And, you know, in a year, again, you know, I was expecting to see a little bit poorer conditions, you know, when I first come over. You've had a little bit of rain to help you catch up in the last few months, but, you know, a lot of particularly mixed farmers, not necessarily just livestock farmers, but mixed farmers tend to concentrate on the crop a lot more, and they get rid of those grass weeds as soon as they can out of their pastures. And, you know, sometimes they're doing you a real good favour and they're providing a lot of feed in your pastures, so it's just something to think about. And if you're going to be grazing crops, just think about how early you get rid of those grass weeds, because they can provide quite a bit of feed value if you don't have too many problems with grass weeds in your system. So again, you just have to look at the prices. If the prices are pushing the grain up and you're having to put that through the stock, you've really got to look at if you're getting that return back from the stock as well. So one of the lessons learnt from the Grain and Graze project is any of the farmers that decided what they wanted to do early, so they decided, yeah, we're going to graze 2 paddocks out of our 20, they were well better off than the ones that made the decision sort of halfway through the season. So sort of a good idea to have plans in place before the season even happens, just so you know, because when they made the decision of what to do with the paddock early, that's when the ones they won with the gross margin sort of prices there. So that was just one of the learnings. So just in practice, you can see down the bottom there, I've got your dry sheep equivalents of what you're dealing with when you're looking at calculations. So grazing some sort of crops, your cereal crops can be grazed at a much lower feed on offer than your pastures can. I've just been grazing a paddock just for trial purposes at Minipa, where we put them in, and there was only 300 kilos of dry matter there with a barley crop. So it's it can be grazed a lot lower feed on offer because the sheep can physically reach it. You know, it's something that you don't really think about. Your pastures can be, 200 to 600 kilos of dry matter and only be so high, and the sheep can't actually get their mass around it. So something to consider. If you want early biomass, your cereals are going to be the way to go. Making sure if you are putting them out in the green crop, you're giving them some supplementary feed just to ease them into it. And making sure that you're not sort of doing it, you're not putting them out there first thing in the morning where they're just going to go guts themselves. Put them out late in the afternoon so they can just sort of ease themselves into it. Very rough rule of thumb, because there's a zillion different calculations out there. You can work out your own stocking rates and everything. The books tell you it all. But very rough rule, one DSC will consume about 1 kilo of dry matter per day. You want to allow though at least 2 kilos of dry matter per DSC, and that allows for a bit of trampling, residue, all that sort of thing. So that's just a very, very rough rule of thumb if you're looking at grazing a green crop. So when you start grazing, your cereal crops you can graze as soon as you can't. You get the flag leaf between your 2 fingers, and as soon as you can pull it up and the plant doesn't physically pull out of the ground, you can start grazing. A lot of farmers are scared to graze that early, but I'll show you some pictures in a moment of when we put the sheep in and the crop hasn't been damaged. It's, you can start grazing it when the crop just starts tillering, when it's about 3 leaf stage. So it's amazing. You just got to sort of get your mind over the fact that it's not going to do damage to the crop. And if you're looking at a grain and graze situation that you want to get some sort of yield at the end of the season, there's so many different situations. It's a 50-50 toss-up whether you're going to lose yield or not lose yield, and it depends on the end of the season. So you don't know at the beginning of the season whether it's going to happen. But by doing it like this, putting them on when there's about 500 kilo of dry matter per hectare, and taking them off any time it gets down to that stage, or where it gets down to the white part of the plant, that's where you want to cut them off. If you can do that before it gets to growth stage 30, chances are you should get a decent yield if you get a rain in the springtime. So, we can't tell you yes or no. If you're looking at a grain and graze situation, but if you're just looking at grazing crops and keeping the biomass there, these are sort of the guidelines to go by. Like I said, how hard to graze down to the white line, and you just got to remember that there will be delayed maturity later on in the season from grazing crops, which can be a way of getting around the frost issue as well, so that's something to consider. So just a few figures, and like I said, all the figures are in books or in publications, you can look them up, but average crop growth rates, if you're getting 100 days from sowing, that's probably too late for this grain and graze situation. But you're sort of looking at, you just got to work out the crop growth rates and try and get it so that the crop's actually growing up underneath the feet of the animals, and not the other way around, not that they're going to be smashing it so much that you're going to have to take them out after a week.
Did you do any varietal testing, or was it you just said wheat and barley, but there's...
there's all sorts, just in the trials that we did at Minipa, we did a lot of different types, but then there was a lot of different trials done across southern Australia where they used, feed barleys and feed wheats. Like they did a lot of trials on Moby barley. Yeah. But we concentrated a lot on, because our farmers are definitely mixed farmers, they're not livestock orientated. We did a lot of trials on grazing sort of what we have over there, so a lot of it was done on maize and mob catchum. And Yeah, so lots of different varieties, but we sort of tried to choose varieties that had lots of early vigour. That's the main, I guess, if you're looking at grazing a crop, that's what you want. We didn't sort of go into anything that didn't have that early vigour because we just didn't encourage the farmers to do that. You want the biomass, so yeah, but we tried to use varieties that farmers were actually sowing. Whereas, yeah, any of the trials done sort of in Victoria, they looked at more of the feed types, yeah. Yeah, a lot of that information's in the books and all the summaries.
Yeah, because if you're 100 days from grazing too late, is that you wouldn't graze barley 100 days by sowing?
From sowing,
Yeah.
yeah, not if you're grazing. If you're just grazing for biomass and you're not going to care about the yield at the end of the season, not a problem, keep doing it, but that's just if you're, looking at getting a yield.
Your intakes there at the bottom, is that dry matter or is that wet?
So the intakes,
Yeah.
that would be dry. Yeah. So I said on the earlier slide about 1 kilo per DSE, very rough. Yeah. So just some of the health issues when you think about grazing crops. Like I said before, make sure that the animals don't go into the crop hungry. Make sure that there's access to hay all the time. They need to sort of balance that out unless you've got a decent stubble load left over and they're having a nibble at that. Or you've got some decent scrub in the paddock, just making sure there's some sort of roughage as well. Make sure there's gradual adaptation to the diet. Monitor the stock, particularly anytime there's a bit of rain around, because you can get a bit of nitrate toxicity if you get a bit of rain and then some decent sun after that. So in the first week, really monitor them. As soon as they start to get the runs, take them out, just ease them into it. If you put them in there and, we put some in straight from the feedlot, monitored them and they were fine, completely fine. They hadn't seen a bit of grain feed for about 8 months and they were fine, but it's, we just had to keep an eye on them. For the first week, make sure that you're not putting any nitrogen fertiliser on and then putting the sheep in afterwards. They can get nitrate toxicity. And so be careful when you're grazing wheat or triticale. You can get sort of a few issues with magnesium deficiency, so that's something to sort of talk to your stock agents about, providing some supplements if you're going to be doing that. And just be aware that most cereals are always deficient in calcium, so if you've got lambing ewes, you've really got to make sure that you've got some calcium supplements on hand for them. Grazing your standing crops is dry feed source, so this is sort of after maturity. Is a really good way to provide the quality feed there with a good balance. The risk, I guess, with this is that as soon as you get a rain, that quality deteriorates pretty rapidly. So if everyone had done it this last year, we would have been laughing. Nobody got any rain over summer, so there would have been some brilliant standing crops around. But again, it's just another tool that you can sort of put in your toolbox and work with. So grazing the crops avoids the cost and losses of the conservation or the fuel that you're going to burn or the grain storage costs and sort of, I guess when you think about it, you're double handling by locking them up in containment feeding and putting the grain through them. This is a way that you can sort of cut that labour side of it out and a few costs. Like I said, you just got to be really wary of, when you're going to be grazing them and the sort of forecast that it's got for the summer. They should really be grazed before you go locking them up in the feedlot and feeding them preserved fodder. Use the standing crops first. You also have to be really wary of the quality of it when you measure the quality, because they'll selectively graze, whereas I guess when you're doing a ration in a feedlot or a containment area, you can really sort of determine what quality they're getting. They will selectively graze. They'll go smash their heads, in a standing crop and then come back and get the rest. So just something to be wary of. So when you're looking at different options, oats are probably one of your best standing feed crops because it's safe. cheap, and is interesting though. We did a trial a couple of years ago in Minnepa 2016, that really good year. We had a standing crop like this, and the weaners wouldn't even go near it. They just cut laps around it because they're too scared to go in it because it was too tall. So you just got to think about things like that. For example, barley, they're not so keen about grazing that as a standing crop because they get tickled by the horns, even though it's a really good one, unless it's quite a short, you know, almost sort of failed barley crop. Something, yeah, to consider. Wheat is quite risky, so you must make sure that animals have been exposed to the grain before. Peas really good, but again can be risky. Lupins are really good, but be aware of lupinosis after the rain on the stubble. And mixtures are even better, but they're just a bit more complex to grow and manage with when it comes to your weeds and everything. So just an idea. Just some of the tips and tricks to get the most out of grazing. Consider where your placement of your water and your scrubs and your feeders and your hay are. You know, sheep will camp on sand hills and, you know, just absolutely smash the hills, and you'll have two different paddocks within the one paddock. You know, I'm waiting for the day that they bring out virtual fencing. We've got, you know, 150 sort of hectare paddocks that we're dealing with sometimes, and sheep like to be little buggers and just camp out where they're not supposed to. So, you know, if you've got a paddock where they're not utilising areas, put your hay there. You know, make sure that they have to walk from the hay to the trough. You know, don't put it all there together because they'll just hang out around there. So with the greater bulk, the higher stocking rate is the best practice. But again, that's not always practical when you get the big paddocks. You know, electric fencing is fantastic, but again, for us, it's just not practical. There's not enough power that we can get for our electric fencing for the size paddocks that we have. So again, we're waiting for the day that virtual fencing becomes an option. So yeah, matching the stocking pressure so you can sort of keep that feed short and sweet is really the best way to go. As soon as it becomes rank, they just go off with it, and they pretty much start losing condition. So weaner lambs tend to move around the paddock a lot more than your older ewes will, so graze them first and then put your ewes in because you'll get better utilisation that way. And the ewes will conserve a bit more ground cover that way, and the weaners tend to run around and lose a bit of weight if they sort of go in and there's feed that they're chasing. So make sure they get the best of the best. Spray topping or spray grazing is a really good way of sort of keeping the quality of the plant, particularly if you've got a few weedy sort of paddocks that you're planning on grazing. So something to consider, you know, in the springtime, sort of spray topping, and if it's a crop that you don't want to reap, then chuck the sheep in there. Weed seed management is important there. And conserving as hay can be a really good return and quite really good valuable money compared to, you know, sometimes reaping it. So do your sums, particularly over here, you guys might be better off taking that option sometimes. And again, do your own sums every single year, every season. All the grain prices, all the livestock prices are going to be different, so I can't tell you, unfortunately, black and white what to do. But I can give you some examples. This is, well, it's really just a bonus trial that we've just done at Minnepa this year just to see some grain and graze results. This is Bennett wheat that was sown back, I think it was the 10th of May. And yeah, it's been a long-term trial that we've had going. We've had grazed areas and ungrazed areas, and high input, which is high sowing rates, and high grazing rates, high fertiliser rates, versus low input, which is what all the farmers are doing, which is lay practice. So the DSE for the lay practice is pretty much 7 DSE per hectare. You guys will probably be running a bit higher over here, but we just wanted to sort of show that if you really up your inputs with your sowing rates, with the pastures in your off years and with your stocking rates, that it can provide a really good return. So over 9 years we've been able to show a fantastic return. Some of the results are in the those books there, but if you look on the Grain and Graze website, I've written a paper on this trial every single year, and this is just going to be another year of the trial, but pretty much there was hardly anything, as you can see there. That's the high input area on the background there, that's sort of the low input area. We put the sheep in there, and they've been in there for 2 weeks and gained 4.5 kilos. So it doesn't look like much, but it can just be a way of spelling your pastures, giving your pastures an opportunity to grow, and you know, I can't see that there will be any yield disadvantage in those paddocks whatsoever. So just another option, very short-term option, but that's one way that we can sort of utilise the Grain and Graze sort of option. And why keep sheep? Why bother going through all of this? You know, the numbers just show that it's worth it. You know, and like I said on that earlier slide, and some of the research has shown that, you know, the modelling over the Grain and Graze project, particularly within the last 5 years, has shown that with current prices offering, this is just an example with the merino operation, you can keep ewes in a feedlot for 365 days and lambing them down in confinement and allowing for all your husbandry costs and labour costs and everything, and be better off than getting rid of your sheep. So it's just really encouraging. I often put this up when I'm talking to cropping farmers, just to show them up. But you really got to do your sums and look at whether it's going to be a benefit to take that crop to yield, utilise some of that crop for sheep, harvest some of that crop for sheep feed, or just how you can work it in with your business operation. But as you can see up there, the dollar is paying at the moment when it comes to livestock operations, so it's well worthwhile keeping your sheep.